Hi everybody, how are you doing? I hope you all are doing very good. In this class, we are going to learn another aspect of culture. Now, I think that you have learned so many aspects of culture during this course. So I'm going to discuss another unique aspect of culture. So I hope that that is going to be useful for your understanding. Okay, let me share my screen with you. As you know, when you go to another country or when you visit a foreign culture, you may have to face uh, so many challenges as well as problems. So in order to solve these problems, you have to be very positive in the sense that whatever comes in your path, you should be able to manage it and try to face it successfully. If you are a person who does not want to be in that way, surely you will be fail. So the first thing is you have to be very positive and motivated, and then things will comes in your way rather than it is going out of your way. So in this lesson, we are going to uh, learn another unique aspect of culture, because during this course, this short course, I think you all are learning so many aspects of intercultural characteristic or intercultural um, um, components, how the cultural things are exchanged, things like that. So how unique cultures are appearing, and all these aspects are quite um, interesting in terms of understanding as well as uh, be familiar with the culture. So in this class, I'm going to teach you another um, unique aspect of culture, that is called cultural immersion. And this is one of the way in which we can absorb cultural value uh, in most effective way. And then you will be able to learn and then try to be familiar with that culture quite easily. So I'm going to discuss with you one specific experience related to cultural immersion. And then I will give you some case studies, or rather my own experience. So how did I cope, or how did I learn by being exposed to, especially in this case, Thai culture. Now I am going to talk about more about the Thai language or Pasa Thai, right? I think most some of our students are Thai students, so they are quite familiar with what I am talking. So, but before that, I should say that sorry, that the idea that uh, some of the words and some of the concepts that we have to be familiar in the first place, and then try to understand how that is applied. So I'm going to bit of concentrate to learn, first of all, the concept, and then try to apply how it can be applied in day-to-day life. Now, before we try to understand cultural immersion, we need to understand what is culture. Right? Now, this is very interesting because now we are living in a global village with so many cultures, with so many cultural values are quite rapidly exchange because of the technology. And the technology is the tool that we can learn foreign cultures so easily. So, but before that, we need to understand what is culture. From Thai perspective, you know, Pasa Thai or Thai language, it is called Vattanatham. Now, I think most of the Thai students, they understand Vattanatham. Vattanatham is the word used for culture in Thai language, right? So we need to try to understand what is Vattanatham, and then we try to understand what is culture, right? Vattanatham comes from this compound word, because there are combination of two words, right? Vattana and Dharma. This is related to another two languages, that is Pali and Sanskrit, and which means this compound word is a combination of Indian languages, classical languages, Pali and Sanskrit, right? So that means Vattana is growth, the development, or you can say growth. Growth of what? Dharma. Dharma, you can say practice or customary observance or prescribed conduct. So Dharma could be anything, like what you practice or what you accumulate in your day-to-day life, and then that pass into next generation. So that is Dharma. That what you collect as a society and then try to pass to another generation. So that is sort of meaningful interpretation when you go into Vattanatham, when you deconstruct, because we need to, first of all, we need to understand concept by deconstructing some of the words literally. So in other words, when we try to understand concept, we can do it by deconstructing or separating concept, and then try to understand the meaning of each term, right? So when it comes to Vattanatham in Pasa Thai, it is a sort of growth of practice or growth of usage. That means a society or the community as Thai, they accumulate, they collect within their society, and then they pass into next generation. So that is simply the idea of culture in terms of Thai language. I think it's quite meaningful because it has everything in it, because simply it has given the meaning what it requires in terms of culture. Now we can go to the next aspect, that is culture, that we get from European languages, that is English. But culture is not necessarily unique to English, but it comes from Latin. So we need to understand what culture means in European context. What does it mean? So literary means cultivation. Now, for example, very similar to growth. Now you can see that when you say that we are distant as Europeans and Asian, but still we have some quite similarities, right? So literary means cultivation, right? Agriculture, borrowed from Latin cultura. Cultura is the Latin term, right? Which means agriculture. So that means agriculture mean, so what happens in agriculture, it is like sort of you are trying to cut the forest and try to burn it, and then try to use some pesticides and some organic fertilizers, and then add your own organic methods, and then try to plant the seed. So this is the concept of agriculture. So that means culture is also something is very much related to that aspect. That is your cultivation through education. Now, not this is a figurative sense, not literal. When you say literal, it is exact meaning, but figurative sense that you are trying to cultivate through education, systematic improvement, and refinement of the mind. Now, this is what happens in a culture. You are sort of culturally taught. You are taught by culture, by education. So how to live, how to behave, how to talk to each other, and there are some do's and don'ts. We call it etiquette, the good manners, etiquette. All these things are components of culture. So when you learn that, especially the education is part of this cultivation, or you can say it's you are taught with the education, right? So in other words, education has a big role to do with the culture. So that, in other words, education is the tool which teach you culture, right? So the term culture describes arts, beliefs, customs, foods, social practices, and all these things. Culture is a sort of vast area. It has so many aspects. So when you say culture, it has everything in a community. So you cannot separate culture from other aspect. So it's so much bound. So that means it is bound together with the aspect of this powerful tool called culture. So it's a binding tool. It is a binding tool that we all have to go with, because culture comes at the very beginning of our birth, right? Because when you are born, when you are so sort of there are some certain things that you have to do. You are supposed to get a name, and all these things they are part of culture. So that is why, that is why culture is a part of our life. In other words, when you are born, and then until you the last moment of your death, you are bound to culture. So you cannot escape from culture. If you live in your own culture, even when you travel to another culture, you have to be in that particular culture member. For example, I am Asian, so when I travel to another Asian country or a European country, I have to respect other cultures' value. So we cannot escape this cultural tool or the cultural thing that we discuss. I hope that you have some understanding about the concept of culture. Okay, now we need to understand the next concept, immersion. Now, as I said, cultural immersion. So now we know what is culture, and now we try to understand what is immersion. Immersion is a sort of the state of being covered by a liquid. That means when you are absorbed by water, or let's say, for example, something is absorbed by water, that is immersion. That means totally you are absorbed into that particular, it's like a sponge, right? So you are absorbed to that environment, right? The other, that is a one interpretation. That means and another interpretation is that a situation in which you are completely involved in something. That is, now you can say, state of being completely involved in something. That means you don't do any other works, but just to involve in that particular situation or incident completely or fully. That is immersion, right? So that means sometimes when you are completely involved, you cannot do some other activity or some other works, right? So you are simply, totally, or fully involved in that situation. So that is called immersion. Now we know what is culture now, we know, and then now we know what is immersion. Now we need to understand what is cultural immersion. Now that is our next slide we need to understand. Right. Now, cultural immersion is a concept. Now, when you deconstruct, we need to understand what are these two concepts. Now we are trying to understand what cultural immersion as a single concept or one concept, right? So when you say cultural immersion, it is something that is related to a foreign culture or somebody visiting a foreign culture, and then that person is actively being part of that foreign culture. Like, for example, when a person visits another culture, maybe a European culture or Asian culture, and that person is undergoing, trying to be part of that culture. That community is not familiar to that person. So that is called cultural immersion. For example, it could be anywhere. Like a Thai person is visiting an Indonesian culture. It is cultural immersion. Or a Thai person is visiting Chinese culture, right? It is cultural immersion, because it is unknown, right? Even though we have borrowed or we have taken some ideas and some concept or some cultural values, we have exchanged each other, but realistically, we are not aware that we haven't visited that culture. But when we visit that culture, we are facing, or we are sort of we are treated as unknown or a foreigner, but we are visiting them as an unknown community, unknown member, right? So that means, in this case, we need to understand cultural immersion happens basically when you are not aware of any culture previously, but when you visit another culture, it is your first time in that culture, and then that is the situation you can practice, or you can do this cultural immersion method. Now I will say what is this method is, because when you visit a culture, maybe some people may not try to reach the cultural members and the other community members of that unknown community, and then there will be some problems. And even the mentality or how you think about a foreign culture also severely affected, because if you are a person, if you hate some other cultures, then you cannot practice this cultural immersion, because you are sort of not looking at positively. You rather sort of negative, in the sense of looking at other cultures. So that is, in that situation, it's very unsuccessful way to implement this cultural immersion. In other words, cultural immersion is a way in which we can practice by being exposed to that culture 100%, not 20% or 50%, 100%. That means, now as you can see in this photo, now this is a sort of African tribe, and there is a European woman. There's an European woman. So she's sort of practicing cultural immersion. Now these guys are holding long sticks, long clubs, right? So does this lady. And then the woman is also wearing the similar kind of way, right? So you can see there are some similarities, right? So this is a good example to understand cultural immersion, because cultural immersion happens, you need to absorb in that particular culture. So when you, in other words, when you go to a foreign culture, you need to become a member of that foreign culture, and then try to listen to them and try to replicate them, try to sort of imitate them, what how they are now, let's say how they are sorry, their accent, you can imitate their accent, and then try to eat their food and try to involve in their activities, day-to-day activities. You forget about your mother culture. Let's say your mother culture. Mother culture is the culture you are born and raised. That is mother culture. But when you visit a foreign culture, that is, let's say, secondary culture. So you should forget the mother culture and now focus about secondary culture. So in other words, you don't think, or you don't act, or you don't behave according to your mother culture anymore. Now you are part of this unknown culture. Now you are part of this, now you are member of this unknown culture. So this is called cultural immersion. So this is not a sort of easy task, because you have to have a sort of positivity, and then you have to think, listen and understand others' opinion, and then respect others' views, and all these good qualities should be there. Otherwise, it's very hard to practice this kind of cultural value. So interaction with local members of community by engaging daily activities. So that means it could be temporary, it could be for years. When you live in a community or unknown society, when you live in a society which is unknown to you, it could be very short period of time. It could be more than that. But what you have to remember is that this is something that you fully involve in what they are doing. So in other words, when you interact, when you sort of share food, and when you share shelter, and then you have to be fully involved in that culture. So that is called cultural immersion. Now as far as the discussion goes so far, I hope that you have some amount of understanding about cultural immersion. Now there are some advantages of cultural immersion, because when you practice this cultural immersion, you have the opportunity to learn new values of that new culture. For example, food and the cultural norms, behavior, cultural practices, dressing, and their religion and their religious practices. All this can be learned through cultural immersion, and that is very effective way. Now you can learn, of course. Now some might question that we can learn from through reading books, through reading by watching internet, or by watching whatever articles written on internet, right? So that is another source, but this is a sort of first-hand experience, right? In that way, this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity to learn new culture and their overall perspective, or the overall frame of the culture of that particular group. So that means that culture receives more attraction, or more sort of, when you visit that culture and then you talk about your own members, when you after visiting, now when you travel back to your home country, and then you talk about that culture, or even you can write it, or even you can produce some videos, and that is a sort of that gives an sort of platform to propagate, or to spread the new culture that you visited before. Okay. Now we need to understand. We sort of we were going through sort of the concept initially. Now we try to understand the most important aspect of our discussion, that is Thai language immersion. Now this is a sort of personal perspective, or rather how I experienced in Thailand when I visited Thailand a couple of years ago. So I am from Sri Lanka. So I visited Thailand, and then I got the opportunity to work at Mahidol. So, but during this period of time, how I try to understand especially the Thai culture, and then more specifically the language, or Pasa Thai, right? Because learning a foreign language is not a sort of easy task, because you are supposed to commit yourself so much, and allocate your time consistently, and then you will learn over time, and then you will be able to pick up certain methods and pattern by being exposed to Thai culture. For example, let's say when I sort of divide two examples, when I am in Sri Lanka, and then when I am now in Thailand. So when I am trying to learn Thai from Sri Lanka, and then I am in Thailand, but I am still trying to learn Thai. So when you see these two situations, when I am in Sri Lanka, and then the thing is, I don't have that much contacts with the Thai culture. So of course I can go to internet and look at internet sources. I can watch YouTube videos on Thai language, Thai culture, and how Thai language is sort of developed. All these aspects can be learned, right? But there is a limit. But when I am in Thailand, I have more opportunity that sort of to experience Thai culture firsthand. So now I am an outsider, right? I am an outsider. Still, I don't have the sort of the idea or how the Thai culture works. But still, I am feeling that I am being positive, right? So I can overcome any challenges. So I have that mojo or the magic power. We call it mojo, right? So that there is a difference, completely different result, because you don't know how you learn Thai language by being your own country. But by being in Thailand, you have more opportunity to learn, and then there is a sort of effective. There is an effective way in learning Thai, right? Okay. So the Thai language is a sort of a language which is Pasa Thai, or Thai language is made up of so many languages. So it has sort of its own dialects or its own terms, original terms. It has borrowed from so many other Indo-Aryan languages like Sanskrit, Pali, and also it has borrowed from so many European languages like Italian, English, and also it has some borrowing from Chinese. So you can see that there is a sort of diversity in the language of Thai, right? So the idea is when you are sort of when you cannot converse with native Thai, sometimes people might miss the uniqueness of Thai culture, because within Thai culture you have some uniqueness. For example, when you go outside, you have Ahan Thai. We call it Ahan Thai, and then we have so many Thai recipes, right? Some are very spicy, some are very mild, right? So this uniqueness is very important in terms of learning not only Thai language, but also exploring the Thai culture. So basically, the methods I have been following in learning Thai, I should say this is a sort of anecdotal or sort of personal experience. I did sort of, I am not fluent in Thai, but still I'm trying to be sort of collecting so many Thai words and methods and so many Thai terms, etc. So the methods that I have been following is that I try to hang out sort of local Thai people and then try to exchange Thai only sometimes, because when there are so many Thai people on a table in a restaurant, then they don't speak English, right? Which I am be familiar with, but they speak Thai, right? But occasionally they try to translate it to me, right? So what I am doing, I'm trying to listen to their conversation. So sort of, I'm trying to carefully try to understand how they express their emotions, how they respond to the questions, and how they give their opinion, right? And then sort of ahantai aroi mak. When you say ahantai aroi mak, the Thai food is very delicious, right? So this sort of common terms is quite common, right? And then it's easy to understand. So when you visit one time, you might miss some of those terms, but when you visit over and over, and then you sort of be familiar with the terms, and then you have the chance to memorize, and then next time you will try to speak with them first and in Thai. So that is one method. So when there are so many Thai people, I try to sort of listen to their conversation rather than I myself asking so many questions and try to interrupt the conversation. So that is a one way, right? The other thing is passion and interest in learning day-to-day greetings and sentences. Now, when you have passion and interest towards anything, I think it's easy to learn so quickly, because you have the passion to somehow I learn Thai. Somehow I try to speak Thai. Maybe not during this year, but perhaps next year or a couple of years in the future, I will be able to speak Thai language fluently, right? So I'm going to be fluent in Thai in a couple of years in the future. So that is the passion. Then it's very easy to pick up all these terms and sentences, etc. Okay, now that is the way that I tried my methodology. And then also another aspect is knowing mother languages of Thai. Now, as we discussed a little bit earlier, Thai language is made up of so many other languages. That means Thai language is a composition of so many languages. Like you have Indo-Aryan languages, and then you have, when you say Indo-Aryan languages, you have Sanskrit language and Pali language, and then you have Chinese language in Thai language. Like when you say Thai language, it has Sanskrit language, Pali language, some terms, and also some terms from Chinese language, and also from European languages like English and Italian, and etc. So that means if you are familiar, like for example, I think most of our students are from China, I guess I'm not sure, but they know they are, because the Chinese is their language, and they have an advantage of learning Thai language, because some of the terms are, the Chinese terms are in the Thai language. Like, I have some familiarity with Pali and Sanskrit languages. So I take that as advantage to learn Thai. So that is a one personal experience. So in other words, pre-language or sort of knowing pre-languages, or sort of you can say your understanding about Pali and Sanskrit is an advantageous, right? It is an advantage. And also you have some sort of Chinese influence in Thai language, so that you can use as a method to learn Thai language. So yeah, so that means it has so many opportunities to understand and to learn Thai language. Okay, now when it comes to the modern Thai, right? Modern Thai language, I think now, for example, with the arrival of new technology and this creation of global village about after the internet revolution, now we do see that there is a sort of this is not common to Thailand, but it happens everywhere. Now we can see there is a sort of spread of English language so fast. So that is why now when you say Tinglish, now you have this, the word called Tinglish. Tinglish means Thai and English, right? So Thai and English is a word Tinglish. That means nowadays when you visit a coffee shop in Thailand, right? When you visit a fast food restaurant in Thailand, when you visit a recreation park in Thailand, you will see, you don't see the English term, but you will see the English term in Thai script, right? You will see the English word in Thai script. Now, when you say okay, and then Thai people use it in their own script, okay, right? So this is called Tinglish. Now, when you, for example, when you see, when you go to the modern vocabulary in Thai language is taken into account, you will see there are so many words being borrowed from English language. Like, for example, when you see food, you can see these are all the Thai names, but what they have used is they are using the English word in Thai script. So this is a new development, especially in recent 100 or maybe 200, or let's say 100 years, starting from 100 years ago. So it's a sort of new development, but this is a good way to understand how the Thai language is developing.